Well, this morning it's a real treat because I've got some new gloves. I think I probably go through, well, 3 or 4 pairs a year that I end up putting in the bin. And this morning I thought I'd wash my gloves and I ended up putting 3 or 4 in the bin because they were just full of holes and ripped. So got some new ones. Fantastic. Right, well, I've got some things to share this morning, and one of them is a bit of a disaster. I'll come on to that shortly. But I'm in that difficult period that all gardeners are in, I'm sure, certainly the ones in the UK, of when to sow. Should I sow or should I wait? And there's quite a lot that can be sown now. And last year, there were quite a few decisions I made about waiting and sowing things later. Things like celeriac. I sowed some indoors and I sowed some in the polytunnel. And I remember distinctly saying I should have waited and I won't bother sowing these indoors next year. So that's what I'm doing. I'm hanging in there with the celeriac. But there's a few seeds that I'm thinking, why not get on with them? And if they don't work out, I got a second chance. And you do need second chances, especially when the weather is so unpredictable. So this week, the temperature went down to -7 in this polytunnel. And I'm afraid it had quite an impact. I'll show you. So you'll probably remember, if you watch my channel, that I've recently got the runners in from the strawberries outside and potted them up, and these are the plants that were already potted late last summer, and they're doing great, and I think I'll be using these in my hanging baskets fairly shortly. That wasn't necessarily the plan because I thought I'd be putting in the new runners, but let me show you. So here they are. And they have been well and truly smacked by the frost. And I think they're going to be okay. Certainly there's some green, but there's a hell of a lot of brown. And they really took a beating in that frost. And what I think I've learned is that having them on the bench is a bit of a risk because there's cold air all around them. Whereas the ones that were on the deck over here only had the frost from the top, or at least the cold air from the top. So that was a fairly substantial learn on my part. And whilst I thought I had much more than I needed in the way of strawberries, now I'm beginning to think I'm glad I did, because these may take a little bit of recovery before I can use them. Now I looked back at my videos from last year, and ironically it was almost precisely this week last year that I ended up starting to put the strawberries into baskets, and that's what I'm going to do this week. So I'll do some of that, but I've got to get this polytunnel sorted out. I'm one of those people who can't really work in a mess very easily, and my polytunnel is in a bit of a mess. So I'm going to do a bit of tidying up and then I'll be able to see my way clear. Well, that's a bit more organised. I can see my way clear now as to what I need to do. So I'm going to get these strawberries that have taken a bit of a hit and pop them down here, and from here on in it's a case of watching the temperatures. Because I'm sowing and I'm planting, you get a little bit lapse and you think, nah, I'll be okay, but clearly it's not. If the temperatures drop again, I think I've probably got to get some fleece on top of things in here, and I'll be doing that from this point onwards. So let's get these strawberries down to the compost level and then we'll look at some of the seeds. So it's that difficult time when you decide when to start. And of course I'm talking about sowing seeds. And I'm trying to resist this year from growing things too early and then struggling because it's just a bit too cold to put them out into the beds. And therefore I'm going to be a bit picky, and I'm going to grow stuff that either is a bit slow growing or really benefits from potting up a few times before you put it out. And then the last category is stuff that's just really pretty hardy and will probably tolerate the cold temperatures without a problem. And if I can put it out and it's just a bit chilly, it won't have too much impact. So brassicas, of course, is one of those. And last year I grew cabbage greyhound. And greyhound seemed to be more resilient to slugs on my plot than the other cabbage I grew. I grew golden acre and I grew some primo, but this seemed to repel the slugs. And I think it's because the leaves are really fleshy, but it's got a good flavour and it makes a nice strong heart. So you can really get a good meal out of one of these. They're not massive, they're just about perfect. So I'm going to grow some of those, and not too many. I'm going to put them in these very small trays and I'm going to space them out pretty carefully, and then they're going back indoors just to germinate, probably 5 to 10 days, and then back out here into the polytunnel so that they can make sure that those leaves get strong and hardy rather than a little bit leggy as they can get when they're indoors, even under lights. So that's greyhound. I'm also going to do some cauliflower. Now, cauliflower was a difficult season last year. I didn't have much success, and I'm thinking, well, just stick at it because every season tends to be a bit different. And this is cauliflower all year round, and literally you can sow it January, February, March, April, May. So same thing, get a few started off, not too many. And the beauty of starting early with these is that if I get some failures, there's plenty of other chances as we go along the season. I'm going to do some turnips, just a few, just to get some started. Last year I learnt a bit of a lesson. They all came at the same time and we had turnips coming out of our ears. And it was like, are we going to have turnips again? So this year I'm going to do my best to get some good succession. So plant a few early, see how they get along. And then kale. This is the Cabello Nero style kale. This one's called Nero di Toscana, and it's a fantastic kale. Again, it didn't do brilliantly last year, but I'm going to give it another crack because it's done so well in previous years. And same strategy as the greyhound and the all year round cauliflower. And then tomatoes. So I'm going to grow fewer tomatoes in the polytunnel this year. Last year, I thought I grew a few less than the previous, but it's still got pretty congested in here. It's not a massive polytunnel. And I figured I'm going to have a bit of a change of strategy. So I'm going to grow this variety, which I've never grown before, called House. This is a dwarf cherry tomato, and you can grow it in pots. So I'm going to sow 6 or 7 of these and see if I can bring a few seedlings along. And then, whereas last year I grew my peppers all along this bench, I'm going to grow a few peppers in bigger pots down at floor level, and that'll make a bit of space up here for these dwarf cherry tomatoes in pots. So that's going to be interesting. And then Moneymaker. I found that Moneymaker, if I sow it early, it's a very hardy tomato, probably the hardiest of those that I've grown. And therefore I'm going to grow a few of those, see if I can get a few early plants started, and again, let them germinate and bring them out to the polytunnel. So that's the seeds that I'm going to sow now. And there is 2 others which are a little bit different. So I'm going to grow some lobelia. I don't normally grow lobelia. I usually get that from a garden centre or a supplier. But I figure we spend quite a bit of money on lobelia because we like them in the hanging baskets and dotted around the garden. So I've never grown them before. I'm sure many people have. I'm going to give them a go this year. And it says sow indoors January, February, March and April. So seems like a good strategy to me. And I'll get those into the seed tray and again take them back indoors. And these you sow on the surface of the compost. So that's the seeds that I'm going to grow February 17th, and we'll see how we get along. Right, well, I had a little bit of compost left in this tray and I've emptied it into this polystyrene container, and that's for my leeks, which will be in a few days time, and you might want to watch that later if you're interested in how I sow leeks. But I'm going to use a slightly different method for these seeds that I'm starting early. Now, I think people fall into different categories when it comes to compost for starting their seeds. And, you know, there's lots of different ways of going about it. I don't think any of them are wrong. They're just different. And if you get success with one type or approach, then I'm sure that becomes a bit of a favourite over time. And I've always fallen into the category of multi-purpose compost. Just put it in the tray and get on with it. And I've never had too much difficulty. I have noticed recently that some of this compost tends to get a little bit claggy, and I guess that could be me watering it too much. So I'm thinking about having a little bit more of an open compost for sowing the seeds into. I've had this bag of horticultural grade perlite for about a year, so I figure I'm going to use that, and I'm going to sieve some compost into this tray so that it's fairly fine, mix in the perlite, and that will give me a fairly open mix, and that's what I'm going to use for these seedlings. And it'll be interesting to see if that's better than my normal just get on with it sort of approach. So I'll get that prepared. So I've been pretty restrained, made sure I've only sown the number of plants that I really need. I may live to regret that, but I'm hoping that that will mean less maintenance of less plants, and if I can succeed with them, then that'll be a good thing. So there we are, that's 6 small trays, and I've put 10 of most of the brassicas together and just 6 of each of the tomatoes, and by contrast, thousands of those lobelia. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed in that time lapse that I poured water from this bottle into the watering can before I put it on top of the seed compost. And well, I know there's a couple of different views. Rainwater, which is obviously natural, or tap water, which is obviously unnatural. But I've sort of heard that rainwater can have things in it that can cause fungi and algae, and tap water of course doesn't, but on the balance, on the other side, it does include some chemicals. So what do you use? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested to know where the majority lie, and I might just adopt that. One of the things that I am going to try this year is doing some salad leaf boxes. So last year I did quite a lot of strawberries in boxes like this. They were okay, weren't particularly prolific fruiting, not as good as the hanging baskets that I put in the polytunnel. So this year I'm going to try a few of these salad boxes, and the idea is that you fill it up, sow a few of these mixed salad leaves on top, and just let it get on, you know, leave it to its own devices, and hopefully in the not too distant future you've got a nice box of fresh salad leaves that you can portably move to the house, put in the back garden, and then just take salad leaves when you want. Now I grow lettuce in the polytunnel, and this year I'm going to focus on some smaller lettuce, the little gems and the romanas. So we'll see how they go. But this is what I'm going to do for now, and well, the earlier the better. I think this might be a bit slow growing, but that's okay. It'll be ready when it's ready. So I'm just going to fill it with compost and sprinkle a few of these on top and see how we get along. So that box is half filled with some multi-purpose compost, and I'll just get these seeds out. Got my knife somewhere. Right, what have we got here? So this packet is ready to eat in 40 days, cut and come again leaves, crispy lettuce leaf blend from Thompson & Morgan. And it says that you can sow under glass or indoors right throughout the year. So let's give it a go. Now these seeds are not new. This is sow by April 2021. So we're still in time, but as you know, dates never really stop me sowing anything, and I've proven to myself that you don't need to worry too much about it. It may reduce germination rates, but things still grow well after the use by date. So let's get those out. And I think we'll have to gauge how many we use. I'm gonna think, oh, there's enough in there, I reckon, for 4 or maybe 5 boxes, and we'll just sprinkle these on very gently across the surface, reasonably well spaced out, because we want the leaves all over the box. And of course, if they succeed, we should get quite a prolific growth of lettuce from all that seed. I'm just going to tease the surface just so that when I've finished I can't see any seeds anymore, and for me that's good enough. And then we'll give it a water and we'll stick it in the corner and we'll forget about it, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll have some salad leaves, and this can go over towards the house, and hopefully by that time the weather will be a little bit warmer as well. Good times. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.